Okay, we're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to episode 34 by Sarah Mike. Tonight I'm joined by Glenn
Hello.
and obviously my name's Shane. It's just the two of us tonight. John is unfortunately unable to join us. His real job is in the way. So it's just the two of us, and we thought it'd be a good opportunity to maybe talk through some of the nuances of 10th edition, given that Glenn, although a veteran 40k player, has not had too much in this edition, right?
A very, very lapsed player. But in fairness, the gaming side was never like the main driver for me in the hobby. But yeah, just this past couple of editions have passed me by with maybe no more than a handful of games.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that. And so with myself and John, we had a game on Friday. So we thought we'd take, today we could run through how that game went, how we went about what lists we run, how the game actually sort of unfolded, and then as we go, Glenn can ask questions, and hopefully people might find it interesting, and maybe
Yeah,
learn a few
because
bits and pieces.
I was supposed to actually come and watch and see it. So I'll have to use my imagination as to what we're discussing for me to
Yes,
ask the questions.
that's
But
fine.
yeah, sadly, my real life got in the way as well. So it was just it's hard hobbying as an adult.
Yes, indeed. Finding the time can be quite tough. But we'll hopefully be able to take people through it now and see where we get to. So I'm just sharing my screen, so hopefully that's obviously everyone at home could see that, and it will come through on the live stream. But what I wanted to start with is just the two lists myself and John were playing. John, as ever, Death Guard player. Has been playing this list. He's played this list, I think, a couple of times now. I think this version of this was what he took to the tournament.
I was just
So
going to say, is this what he took to the tournament, or
yeah, pretty much,
a
pretty
close
much, yeah,
approximation?
yeah. That's exactly it. So I've tried to lay it out based on how the units were kind of made up, who was leading them, because this edition you attach you can attach characters to units. They effectively become bodyguards, and rather than in like the last edition where the characters gave out auras over a certain distance, they now give the benefit of their abilities to that unit. So with John, he started off with so the Biologist Putrefier, all classic Death Guardy type names. He had an enhancement, so John took two enhancements. This one was the final ingredient, which is, if I remember correctly, this is one that gave him bonuses. Basically, if he was able to kill a character with the unit that had the enhancement, he would be able to put two plagues on my entire army. So short run back on that. Death Guard, one of their like detachment abilities is that they put a plague on your squad and when on your army when you're in an affliction range. So in the first battle round, that range is 3 inches, then it's 6 inches, and then 9 inches from turn three for the rest of the game. If you're within a Death Guard unit, you're then afflicted by their plague. In this case, John's plague was -1 to hit. So Death Guard always put out -1 toughness. So you go down in one in toughness regardless. And then they can add another one, which is -1 to hit, -1 to your save, or -1 to your movement and OC.
So
So
it's essentially it's another layer of contagion, basically. The
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it makes them quite punchy. John normally goes for the -1 ballistic skill and weapon skill. So effectively, you get a modifier to all of your hits, whether you're hitting them in combat or shooting. And then this detachment, what it allows you to do is it allows you to change that plague every turn, should you wish. So you can change what you're doing depending on how important it is. And then there's loads of different bits, like the enhancement, the final ingredient would allow him to run 2 plagues if he managed to make it go off. And there's other tricks he has to other characters that will give him abilities to run more than 1 plague. So that's what this detachment is all about. So you had the biologist Putrefier, which is just like a standard Marine character, alongside a malignant plague caster, which is another Death Guard Marine character. That one's like a psychic one, so he's got like a flamer weapon. And then they were leading, so because of the way Death Guard and those characters work, you can have more than one of them attached to a unit. So both of them were leading a 10-man squad of Plague Marines, and the loadouts for those Plague Marines were shooty. So they were very gun heavy, so melter guns, plasma guns, plague spewers, blight launchers. So they were the very shooty squad, and he had them in a Rhino. So that was his loadout there, what is referred to as the party bus or fun bus. The 12 Marines in a Rhino. Rhino now, this edition Rhino has the shooting deck ability. So that just means you can have a number of Marines shoot out the top of the Rhino. I think you can do 2 for Rhino as a shooting deck 2. So you effectively two of the weapons that the Marines carry become the Rhino's weapons, as well as all of the weapons they normally have. So that's what John started with. Then his next character, one of the newer characters, is the Lord of Poxes. So he's a fighty Marine character. So he's not a Terminator, he's a Death Guard Marine. He gives out, so he starts his ability is they get 9 inches on their affliction range from turn 1. So it doesn't have to go up, it pushes it out quite far to begin with. I can't remember what the enhancement on this one does. But it might have been that he had the ability to effectively target a unit that's afflicted and give them a second plague. So it's not army wide that he can make my entire army have 2 plagues, but he can pick a unit that's afflicted and make that have a second plague as well. And alongside him, he had a squad of 7 Plague Marines, and these were the punchy loadout. So they were all of the bubotic weapons and things like that. And because they're Death Guard, whereas like your standard Marines, you can typically only run squads of 5 and 10.
That's what I was just looking at. I was thinking, 7?
Yeah.
Is he giving up like 3 Marines?
No, Death Guard because of Death Guard things. Obviously, the sacred number for Nurgle is 7. So leaning into the law there, you're allowed to take squads of 7 Plague Marines. It's interesting because that doesn't exist for Thousand Suns or the World Eaters in terms of being able to run their chaos number, but they let the Death Guard get away with it. So
yeah, I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. Whenever I was looking at my Grey Knights, I think because of the way Grey Knights are built, the Paladins and the Terminator squads, there's like 3 different levels of how many guys, it might even be 4 different levels of how many guys to have, anywhere between like 4 to 10. So I would love to see that in more units, but you know.
Yeah, indeed. It is quite. In this instance, it's quite narrative, so it's it's fine. It's nice enough for him to add. But yes, this squad weren't in a Rhino. We're just going to trudge up the pitch, as it were, or up the battlefield. And as I said, designed to be a bit punchier because the Lord of Poxes himself is pretty handy in combat. So that was his combat squad of Marines. Then we get into the Terminators. So 2 squads of Terminators. One of them led by a Lord of Contagion, leading 3 Death Shrouds. They started in Deep Strike. The Death Shroud are like an ever-present this edition in the Death Guard list because they've got ridiculous abilities. So they can obviously deep strike in like any Terminator. But if they're deep striking into an afflicted unit, they can deep strike within 6 inches and they're still allowed to charge. So it's like the only unit in the game that has that ability. There are other units that can deep strike within 6, but they're typically not allowed to charge.
Yeah.
These guys are, so they're allowed to deep strike in 6 inches. They can charge. On the charge, the Lord of Contagion gives them sustained and lethal hits and lance. So what does that mean? Obviously, they get loads of extra hits. They get loads of lethal hits, and then they're wounded. They get +1 to wound when they charge in because they've got lance. So they're pretty nasty in that regard. And then they also give the Lord of Contagion I think it's a 5-up feel no pain whilst they're alive. So if you, let's say you killed those Death Shroud in a round of combat, in that phase, the Lord of Contagion will still have a feel no pain. Obviously, once that phase is over, that feel no pain disappears. But then the Lord of Contagion also, the first time he dies, can stand back up on a 2+ on 3 wounds. So he can keep ticking. If you're running multiple Lords of Contagions, only 1 per phase can do it. So if you killed 2 in like the combat phase, only 1 of them would be able to stand up. But if you killed 1 in shooting and 1 in combat, then they both be able to trigger their abilities.
And regular viewers will know Johns don't stand up very often.
So this is true. What Johns don't do is they fail their 6-inch charges regularly, like that happens quite a lot, and they don't stand up. In this game, spoiler alert, he did manage to stand back up, so he did that bit, but he did manage to fail 2 out of 3 6-inch charges because he obviously he failed one. He re-rolled it and got in, and then I think he failed another one on 4s of all things. So, you know, again, for a lot of players, when you're going up against Death Guard, the Death Shroud hold a lot of fear. To begin with, I was always really nervous about playing Death Shroud at the start of the edition or when they got their abilities, always trying to screen them out. As the edition's gone on, I'm less worried about John's ones, so I don't tend to screen as much. But that is what it is. So that was his first squad of Death Shroud. His second one, this time, was led by Typhus. Again, John's Typhus is notorious for failing with his psychic attack. Actually, in this game, he did manage to get the psychic attack off without blowing his own head off. So that was good. The psychic attack is, you know, for other Typhus models is quite nasty. So it's a roll a d6. On a 1, it does 3 mortal wounds to himself or his unit, effectively, because you can put it on the unit. On a 2 to 5, I think it's d6 mortal wounds, and on a 6, it's d3 +3 mortal wounds. And that's it. You have to take them. That's
this once a game or once a turn?
Every turn, because it's his psychic attack. So
that's pretty nasty.
It is, and he is pretty handy. The thing is, because he's not a Lord of Contagion, he doesn't give them the benefit of things like sustained and lance.
Right. Yeah.
So they still get lethal. It's still pretty nasty. But I think John is now sort of coming round to the opinion that Typhus is probably better off leading Poxwalkers. Because he is a character that's able to lead either the Death Shroud or the Poxwalkers.
Yep.
And a lot of people will put him leading Poxwalkers because effectively, if he's leading a squad of 10 Poxwalkers, you're basically just giving him 10 extra wounds.
Yep.
So it makes sense. And then obviously, if he does roll a 1 on his ability, you can just take away Poxwalkers.
Mm.
So John running with the Death Shroud, you know, they did what they did. We'll come into what happened with them. Then the Demon Prince of Nurgle. He's relatively good. So he's toughness 12, so very tough. Has a invuln, but doesn't have a feel no pain. So there is an enhancement that you can give him that also gives him the feel no pain, and then he becomes like a mini Mortarion. So he's quite tough. You can't get through his wounds. He didn't have the points to give him that this time, so he was just running as a standard one. What he does also do is he's got lone op as long as he's within 3 inches of Death Guard infantry.
Hmm.
So you can't shoot him outside of 12. And he also gives everyone that's within 12 the benefit of cover, because on flyers or something like that, something narrative like that. And then he also has the ability to reduce CP, so stratagems by 1 CP. So effectively, if it's a 1 CP stratagem and he's within 12 inches, you can do it for free, and he gets
Okay.
to do that once per turn as well. So he's pretty handy. The idea would be that you run him around with next to some Plague Marines, so he's always got lone op until you get close enough to get him into combat. He was running around with the Lord of Poxes and their squad of Plague Marines.
Right.
Then the Tallyman, so he stayed on his own. Typically, you'll see this in Death Guard lists where he stays at the back. Basically, every turn in the command phase, he makes a leadership test. If he passes that test, so I think it's like 7 up, you get a CP back. So it's effectively you can generate CP with
Hmm.
the Tallyman. It was interesting to note that John put him as his warlord. This edition, the warlord doesn't mean anything really, because there's no secondary for slay the warlord or anything like that. So you have to put it on the character, but it doesn't really matter at the moment this edition for any real reason, unless I think you're playing like the Crusade rules, which we typically don't. So that was the Tallyman. Then the rest of his like units of that. Then he had 2 squads of 2 Chaos Spawn. The Chaos Spawn, the Death Guard ones, so they have scouts, so they can basically they make a pre-game move before the start of the first turn. I think they've got scout 6 or 7, so they move forward. So John typically does that to like jump on objectives. And they've got quite good rules. Like they're quite tough. And their main rule is that when you fight them in combat, so if you attack them in combat and you don't kill them, you count the number of attacks that went into them up to a maximum of 6. So let's say I had a squad of Scorpec destroyers going in, and I put 18 attacks into them. It would cap out at 6, but effectively they do that back in mortal wounds. So yeah,
What?
if you don't kill
What?
them, yeah. So they spit out mortal wounds back at a unit that attacks and doesn't kill them, which is particularly nasty. So
They're horrible.
yeah,
Is that
you
just Death Guard ones, or is that
that's
Chaos Spawn in general?
that's just the Death Guard ones. That's the Death Guard specific spawn, which is why I think arguably they're up there as one of the best spawns
Yeah.
for Chaos spawns because of that ability.
Hmm.
Um, 2 Mephitic Flight Haulers. So they're like they're tank and monster hunters. So they've got their missiles, they've got their multi melters, and they get, what do they call it? There's a special. It's like monster hunter or tank hunter. So they get +1 to hit and +1 to wound if they're going into a vehicle or a monster. So they can be quite handy going into those sorts of things. And then 3 units of Poxwalkers, 10 in each. And this edition, the Poxwalkers have infiltrate, which just means you can set them up anywhere on the tabletop as long as it's 9 inches away from your opponent's deployment zone or enemy units. So, for example, if I had an infiltrator unit and I put it in, you'd still have to set them up 9 inches away from them, even if it was somewhere in no man's land. So they're quite handy just for board control. As you'd expect, John used them for exactly that, infiltrating up early, just to try and push some board control. So that was John's list. Then we get into my list. So it's slightly smaller, but I think that the actual unit count when you had all the attachments was pretty similar. So this was the Cursed Legion. So this is one of the new detachments for the Necrons. This one's focused around the Necrons that have the Destroyer keyword. So that's we'll come into what that means as we go through it. So I had a Shard of the Nightbringer. So I got the new model. I've managed to get it built. So that was coming on the tabletop instead of the old one. Um, at the moment, they are very overpowered, very undercosted. So the thing that makes them quite overpowered is so that the Nightbringer himself, he gets so he's got 16 wounds. He moves something stupid like I think it's 10, maybe 12 inches. He moves really far. 16 wounds, 3 up save, 4 up invuln, 5 up feel no pain, and everything that comes into him, you reduce the damage by 1.
Oh, of course you do.
Yeah. So they did change it because previously it was you halved all damage. Now it's you reduce damage by 1, but typically most of the stuff that comes into them is like 2 or 3 damage goes down to 1 or 2 damage, and then you've got the feel no pains on top of it. It makes them quite impressive, and then every command phase I then get to use the reanimation protocol, so I get to put wounds back on them, and then I've got other things that can also then give them their wounds back, and strats that can give them their wounds back. So they just become really hard to shift, and they're quite killy. So at the moment, very overpowered. Everyone's using them. I'd imagine in the next balance day, it's like they are going to go up. If they don't have their rules nerfed, they are going to go up in cost, probably by another. It could even be like 100 points, because
That
when you
much?
look at, well, I was thinking about it because Magnus the Red is 425 points.
Mm-hmm.
That's the price of like your general Primarch. At the moment, at least with the Nightbringer and the Void Dragon, they are probably tougher than Primarchs. They're on like Knight level at the minute. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if it goes up that much to try and push people into only running, 1 or 2, apart from in their big Catan detachment, which they might have a bit of trouble with. But I'd imagine they're going to go up in cost. We'll see. Next one is the Hexmark Destroyer. This is a little lone operative guy. He can deep strike. He's got lone op, so can't be targeted within 12. He gets a free Overwatch, so he can Overwatch for free. And when he does Overwatch, he hits on 2s. So normally Overwatch you hit on a 6. This guy hits on 2s. He's also got a return fire rule. So if anyone fires into him or a unit that's within 3, he can fire back. Like just that's it, bang, he shoots back. Pretty good. But why is he even better in this detachment? So the detachment rule for the Cursed Legion, which I should have said before, is anyone that's got the Destroyer keyword, they get +2 strength to all of their weapons. So he goes up from like being just having a strength 5, I think it is, pistol, to having strength 7, and suddenly it means he's wounding on much less than he was, especially against Death Guard. The Death Guard go from being quite hard to wound to being normal to wound, which is an unusual position to be in as a Death Guard player. So he's pretty good, and he started in Deep Strike, so I had him in Deep Strike. Then one of the new characters, this is Necrosaur Amantar. He is also a destroyer. He is also lone op, so he's a lone operative. He gives out a load of buffs for any Necron units and destroyer units that are within 6 or 9 inches of him. And he also has fights first, which in this edition is relatively good, because it just means you're going to be able to get to swing with him. And he's, again, all of his weapons get +2 strength in this detachment, so he's quite killy and quite hard to target because he's got lone op. And although he's got deep strike, he started on the board for me because I was trying to use his aura, and because he's got lone op, I know I could run him into like the middle of the board without anyone really being able to target him.
Is he another one of the new characters that have come out?
He is, yeah. He is new, like within the last month or so. So he was relatively new. Nice little character, nice little model. Again, he probably won't. I don't think he'll get too much of a nerf, but he has got lots of abilities that make him quite interesting. Next up was an Overlord. So this is a standard Necron like leader unit. I put him in with the Necron warriors. So I had a big blob of 20 Necron warriors. The usual idea, you've got the big brick that are hard to take down because they've got the reanimations and there's just a huge number of bodies. They're very good at controlling objectives because there is just a lot of them and they've got a 2 OC, which is pretty good when you've got that many of them. So the Overlord was leading them. He gives them, it's like a captain, so he gives them the reduced CP ability. But I also gave him the Destroyer Ankh enhancement, which in this detachment gives him the Destroyer keyword. Now, the important thing there is that obviously that gives him the Destroyer keyword, and because he's leading a unit, it gives the unit the Destroyer keyword. So the Necron, so the Necron warriors won't. Every Necron warrior model won't have the Destroyer keyword, but the unit will, and therefore that means for some of the stratagems and things in this detachment, you can then take advantage of those bonuses because the detachment rule is that it's +2 strength to every destroyer model's weapon. That doesn't affect the Necron warriors. Unless so that's the other half of the detachment. The first time a destroyer unit takes an enemy unit down to half strength or kills them, the entire army then gets that +2 strength bonus. So it's all about, like, a lot of the time it is about selecting your targets to try and get like a destroyer cult.
Yeah, thin someone out and finish them off with destroyer cult.
Yeah, that's it. And then suddenly your big blob of warriors gets all of the bonuses anyway. So it's pretty good. And that's why the destroyer ranks on there, because I said it unlocks some of the stratagems and bonuses. So that's the idea there. The Plasmancer, so he's a Cryptek, and I gave him the Murder Mind enhancement, which is another enhancement that gives him the Destroyer Cult keyword, but also allows him to lead Destroyer Cult units. So he was attached to the Heavy Destroyers, which they are Destroyer Cults, so they are Destroyer Cult models, so they also get their +2 strength, which means they're already really strong anyway, but they've then got even stronger weapons, which against Death Guard is very handy because he then just pushes you into that break point where you are actually wounding them on 2s rather than 3s or 4s. And him as a character, he gives the unit critical hits on a 5+. So the Lockhurst destroyers get the lethal hits ability. So if you roll a 6 to hit, it auto wounds. So you just have to make a save against it. But with the Plasmancer, that goes off on 5s. So it just means you've got like your heavy gun. If you get a 5, you're auto wounding. So it's very useful. And then because he's a Cryptek, I was allowed to take 2 Cryptothralls, which are effectively, they don't do much. The only thing they really do is give me extra wounds on that unit. So if John was shooting into it or whatever, I can take those wounds on the Cryptothralls first and keep the heavy destroyers alive for longer.
Yeah,
that was the plan there. Then we had a Scorpek Lord, big fighty leader character, quite good. Gave him the Cursed Circlet enhancement. This gives him a surge move. So effectively, if any of the Scorpek destroyers are destroyed when they're shot at, I'm then allowed to make a D6-inch surge move towards the closest enemy unit and can get into engagement range. So I put it on him, and that's why I gave him a squad of 6, because I figured there's more people there if John does decide to shoot them, to take them out so that they can surge forward a couple of times should that come up. Spoiler alert, it didn't actually come up because anyone that died in combat, and then I brought them back anyway. But it's a nice big punchy unit. Next one was the Technomancer leading the Canoptic Wraiths. This is a classic Necron unit combo. The Technomancer gives any unit he's leading a 5+ feel no pain. And the Canoptic Wraiths have a 4+ invulnerable save. So it just means that they're and they've got 4 wounds a model. So what it tends to mean, they're not particularly killy, but they will hold things up. So you can have this block of Raids and Technomancer like 2 turns with Death Shroud, and that's 2 turns that you're going to be holding them up for, whereas most units would crumble against the Death Shroud. But it's just because you've got that weight of 4 up invulnerable on top of them, the 5 up feel no pain, so you can take a lot of damage. And they pretty much did that this game, but we'll go into that. Canoptic Spider, I only ever take this now because it gives out an aura. So anyone that's within 6 of it gets a 6 up feel no pain, or a 5 up feel no pain if it's against psychic or mortal wounds. Didn't really come up a lot, psychic or mortal wounds, this one, but did give my warrior squad a 6 up feel no pain, which again, when you've got 20 of them, they're hard to kill, and you've got a feel no pain. You just keep more of them around for longer. So it's just very annoying. The Doomsday Arc, again, ever present at the moment. It's a big gun, very good at killing Terminators, leaning into anti-tank because it's got a high number of shots, but it can be swingy because it's D6 plus 1 shots. So sometimes you might only be getting 2 or 3 shots, but sometimes when it goes off and you've got 7, then it's quite nasty because it's high strength and does 4 damage. So it's pretty punchy if you get a few of them through. Flayed ones, they're only in the list because they are infiltrators. So I'm able to put them anywhere on the board, and typically that's what will happen. That's what I did this game. Just meant that they're able to get onto an objective turn 1 should one of those secondary objectives come up that you want to run. And then finally, Ophidian Destroyers. The reason, again, why a lot of Death Guard players will have these, regardless of whether it's the Destroyer detachment, is because they have uppy downy. So you can start them on the board, and then at the end of your opponent's turn, you can pick them up. It's called Tunneling Horrors is the term, but it's the uppy downy. So you can pick them up at the end of your opponent's turn, and then effectively you can then deep strike them back in again at the end of your next movement turn. So really useful just to have to defend your objective in the deployment zone. But then if you get like behind enemy lines or other bits and pieces that you need to do, as long as you remember to pick them up at the end of your opponent's turn, you can then drop them back in 9 inches away from any enemy unit and hopefully score that objective. So that they were the lists, and then this was our primary mission. So as with lots of editions, you've got your mission deck. The primary mission for us was Scorched Earth. So this is one where you can take an additional action to burn an objective. So effectively, like a lot of primary missions, the scoring starts from the 2nd battle round onwards. And in this game, you've got 2 different ways of doing it. So the very bottom of the card is probably your standard scoring. So 2nd battle round onwards, end of the command phase, or end of your turn if it's the 5th battle round and you're going 2nd. So that's important. The player whose turn it is scores 5 VP for each objective marker they control, up to 10 VP. So to max out the scoring for that, you just need to hold on to your home objective and another objective, and you're always going to max out at 10 VP, 10 victory points per turn. If you go 2nd, you obviously get the benefit in the last turn to move before you score it. So you can always, going 2nd becomes quite powerful because you don't necessarily need to be ahead. You can be behind, knowing you're going to be able to, hopefully you've got some units and you'll be able to score at the end of the turn. The additional one with this primary mission is that you can take an action while you're on an objective, and you can take the action to burn an objective. Now, what happens if you successfully burn? So what happens is in your shooting phase, you declare that unit will be doing the burn. That means that unit can't then shoot or do other things. And then at the end of your opponent's next turn, so it means your opponent has a turn to try and take that unit off of the objective it's burning by killing them or out controlling that objective. But if you can do it, you can do it. You basically get bonus VP if you're able to burn an objective. So you get 5 VP if it's in no man's land, or 10 VP if it's your opponent's home objective. But once that objective is burnt, it's then removed from the game.
Okay.
So it happens different ways. Like some games, you'll find that people will burn early to limit the number of objectives, so it kind of focuses where the battle goes. Typically, what you find when I've played this one is that people wait until the very last couple of turns to burn objectives, because that's when there's more room and more guarantee of it going off. And we had something similar in this game. I think it was turn 3. John tried to burn an objective, but we'll go through what happened in that particular instance when we get to it. Then this was the deployment. So basically, they give you loads of different, I don't know, 5 or 6 different maps. The map we drew was search and destroy, which is obviously, and then obviously you get the terrain layout as a suggested terrain layout, which we pretty much followed. In this case, the deployment zones are the table quarters, so red and green being where you deploy. Relatively small space to deploy in, but it was fine, and we got most of our stuff in. What was I going to say? What this was quite interesting with this one is it did leave, like, this whole middle objective. There's no terrain in this space. There's loads of room. So there's big firing lanes, lots of open space, quite a scary murder bowl to kind of end up in. So it was going to be interesting to see how that happened. In terms of deployment, I deployed my flayed ones over here, so in this top left corner, to try and get onto this objective. John deployed his 1 unit of poxwalkers this side, infiltrating, another unit down here infiltrating, and then had another one in the backfield just holding his home objective. So he kind of deployed his stuff around there, and then generally deployment followed the same sort of pattern. So John had his 2 Death Shroud in Deep Strike. I had my Hexmark and Nightbringer in Deep Strike, so they both started off the board. And then I effectively deployed my big blob of Necron warriors here with the spider and the Necrosaur behind them. The idea being that I was going to go over here. I put my Canoptic Wraiths in this corner with the idea of sending them up to get that objective, which hopefully the flayed ones would hold on to. In my home objective, because there was like a tower on the 2nd floor, I had my Lockhurst heavy destroyers, so they could kind of see most of the battlefield. And then I had my Doomsday Ark down in this corner, with the idea originally that I was going to sneak around here and then get a good sort of zone of fire throughout the entire no man's land in the middle. That was the plan. And then right in the back, Ophidian destroyers hanging out, ready to uppy downy should I need to. From John's point of view, outside of the Poxwalkers, which we talked about, he obviously had the the fun bus with the all the Plague Marines and the Rhino, and then down this side he had the other squad of Plague Marines and the Demon Prince. And then he had 1 Blight Hauler here and 1 Blight Hauler here as well. So he kind of split them up to run across the again, try and get zones of fire. You roll off for who's attacker defender as usual. John he won that, so he decided to be the defender, and that's where the advantage of that is obviously you get to deploy first, and if you've got infiltrators, it just means you get first drop on the board and can effectively pick wherever they go. So because he dropped in there with his Poxwalkers, it basically meant I wouldn't have been able to infiltrate my flayed ones in this table quarter, which is why I then went up to this table quarter. Once you've finished deploying, you obviously then got to roll for first turn, and if you win that, you have to go first. And John won that. I think we were both of the opinion that we'd probably want to go second, just because for the burn or scorched earth objective, it tends to be easier to go second because you've got an idea of what you need to burn and when you need to burn it. But
just going back to the deployment.
Yeah.
When it comes to deployment, Is it alternate units or is it everything and then the opponent's everything?
No, it's alternate. So
It
you
is
take,
alternate, yeah.
yeah, you take it in turn. So um, John had put one down, and then so on and so on. So you get an idea of where things are going to be. But because of the terrain layout, it was it was relatively easy to hide stuff so that you knew it was going to be safe. Even
Yeah.
if John moved, it was still going to be relatively safe, and that definitely happened. Because if we go into the next one, we can see the scores. So, spoiler alert, I
Hmm.
did win, but that helps us. The reason I wanted to show it is because you can see how the secondaries formed out and how we scored. So, I did go, obviously, I went second. I did manage to win it, but I was behind until the end of the third turn. And then that's when, because if you go second, you can afford to not be in the lead, and then suddenly you kind of take the leap and move forward from there. So in terms of secondaries, so we both played tactical objectives because you now get the choice. You can either play fixed objectives or you can play tactical. If you play tactical, you just draw from a deck of 19 secondaries each turn. You draw two, and that's your two secondary objectives for that turn. You can use a command point to redraw a secondary if you don't like it, but you can only do that once. And obviously that does cost you a command point. So um, you've got to decide whether you want to spend your money to do that. And that did happen a couple of times. Or you can also, at the end of your turn, you can choose to discard an objective, and then you get a CP for that. So you can use it as a way to generate CP. But you can only do that if you haven't generated CP in another way. And what does that mean? So, for example, if John's got his tallyman, who does give him a CP, let's say in the command phase, he can't then discard a secondary to get another CP. So you can only generate one additional CP per turn in that kind of manner. So first turn, John goes first. So he gets a tempting target and secure no man's land. So a tempting target is I pick a objective in no man's land for John to go and try and take. And if he takes it, he scores 5 victory points. In this instance, I picked, what one did I pick? I picked the central objective because it was the only one he didn't have anything on at the time, and it would mean that he'd have to try and push stuff out to get it. So he actually moved his spawn out to get it. So he scored his 5 victory points for that. And secure no man's land is what it sounds like. You have to control at least one objective in no man's land. So it was a really good draw on turn one because by scoring a tempting target, he's also going to secure no man's land. So he gets 5 VP for both. His turn one ends, and he's on 10 points already, plus 10 for the painting standard. So at the end of his turn one, he's on 20 points. I then get my first turn, and I draw establish locus and recover assets. So establish locus is you have to effectively take an action either in the center of the battlefield or in your opponent's deployment zone. I wasn't going to get into his deployment zone, so I had my Necron warriors move on to the central objective. At this point, he'd run away with his spawn, so his spawn were no longer on there, and I scored establish locus. Recover assets. This is where, again, you can have up to 2 units. Yeah, it's 2 units. Oh no, 3 units, sorry, and they recover assets in 3 areas of the battlefield. So deployment zone, no man's land, and your home deployment. If you get all 3 of them, you get more points. I only got the 2 areas, so I got no man's land and my home deployment score, which means I scored 3 points for that secondary. So at the end of the first turn, John's 5 points ahead of me because he's just got a lot better from his secondaries. So we go into end of turn one, and it's running 2015. Then we get into turn two. John scores his first primary points. So he's got his home objective and he's got at least one of the objectives in no man's land. I think he's got 2. So he scores 10 points because that's the maximum you can score. And then he draws Bring It Down and Recover Assets. Now, Bring It Down is the one where it's vehicles and monsters. So
Is the kill a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, kill a big thing. And at that point, my shard was still up in deep strike, so I hadn't come down on the table. The only other big thing was the Doomsday Arc, which was very well hidden. So at this point, John spent a CP to get rid of that and instead drew No Prisoners, which is the kill enemy units. So he spent a CP to get rid of Bring It Down. He got Recover Assets and No Prisoners. He did the same as me for Recover Assets, so he managed to recover in No Man's Land and his home objective. And then for No Prisoners, he killed the Flayed Ones. So he managed to, I think it's the Flayed Ones. Or it might have been the Wraiths. Anyway, he managed to kill a unit, so he got No Prisoners for 2. What happened in John's turn in this particular instance was, first turn was very cagey. There was no shooting, there was no charges. It was just a bit of movement and staging, and that was the same for both of us. In the second turn, he was quite aggressive with his Marines in the fun bus. So they drove up onto the objective that my Flayed Ones were at, with the idea of getting out, controlling that objective, and charging the Canoptic Wraiths with the Technomancer, because they were the 2 units he was trying to get to for No Prisoners. So he moved forward with the Rhino, which had moved forward in turn 1 as well, chucked all his Marines out, swamped the objective, and they were getting ready to shoot and charge into the Wraiths and the Flayed Ones. At that point, I spent my 1 CP to rapid ingress the shard. So rapid ingress is a stratagem where in your opponent's turn, at the end of their movement turn, for a CP, you can deep strike in one of your units. So I deep struck in the shard 9 inches away from his Plague Marines, knowing that when he charged into the Wraiths, they would be within 6 inches of the shard, and then I could then pop my heroic intervention strategy, which allows me to then charge in to his unit with my shard, as long as I can roll a 6 on 2d6, which I did manage to do. I don't get the benefits of charging. It just means John then has the choice of, does he put his Marines into the target of his shard, the Canoptic Wraiths, or does he put his Marines into the shard because they're now in combat? And then obviously when it's my turn to fight back, the shard's already in combat and he can do some damage. So that gave John something to think about. He did go into the raids, and he did manage to kill all of the raids, but he didn't kill the Technomancer. But that still would gives him enough for No Prisoners. Then at the end of the turn, he moves up to, I think it would have been 35 points, something like that, all in. And then it moves over to me. I also scored 10 on the primary. Again, controlling my home. I think I controlled the middle objective as well. Couldn't control the one at the top because obviously the Raves had been killed, and even though the Shard has got good OC, he had a load of Plague Marines on there, so was well above that. And then the secondaries I drew were Area Denial and Cleanse. So Area Denial is in the center. You get what they call mini or big Area Denial. So the mini one is you're within 3, I think it's 3 inches of the center and no enemy unit is within 3, and then the big one is you're within 3 and no enemy unit is within 6. So he didn't have any enemy units within that distance of the center, and I had my Necron squad there, the Necron warrior blob. So I picked up all 5 points for Area Denial. And Cleanse is a bit of a boring one. It's the one where you do an action on an objective. So you're like cleansing an objective. You can do it on multiple ones. I only did it on 1, so I only scored 2. And that meant that I was then on 32 to John's 40 something, 45. So again, slightly behind at this point, but because I'm going second, not overly concerned. What had happened in the turn otherwise, nothing was really happening in the middle because my Necron warriors were just controlling the middle objective. Nothing was really happening down the bottom, the other side, where the Poxwalkers were just controlling their objective. All of the action was really in that top corner where the Marines were. At this point, the Shard was in combat with the Marines. It was only picking 3 or 4 Marines up per round of combat, so it was tied up, but it was also, I wasn't necessarily concerned in terms of the damage that was coming into him at this point. So that was okay. We then move into turn 3. Once again, John scores maximum on primary in that turn, so he gets 10, and he draws Defend Stronghold and Cull the Horde. Now, Defend Stronghold is where you just have to hold on to your home objective, so nice and easy. There was nothing threatening on that one. And Cull the Horde is if I have a unit that has like effectively has a size, I can't remember what the starting strength is, but because I had the 20-man Necron warrior squad, he can get Cull the Horde. So it's a secondary that's designed to take out like large units of chaff. I did have that large unit. He didn't think he was going to kill them, so he spent another CP to get a different secondary, and that one was engage on all fronts, and that's where you get points per table quarter. So you can get maximum if you've got 4 table quarters. John had 3, so he was going to get the 2 points for free. He did get Defend Stronghold. He did get his engage on all fronts, fairly easy ones to score. This was the turn that he dropped in both units of Death Shroud. So he dropped a unit into the middle to try and charge the Necron warriors. And then he dropped a unit, Typhus's unit, in to eye up the Shard. And as per ever with these Death Shroud, he did fail at least one of these charges. So I think the ones in the middle failed their first charge, which he re-rolled, and then they did get in. And then Typhus's unit then went on to fail their charge. So should have been doing a lot more damage, wasn't doing enough damage. At this point, like the Shard is fairly healthy. He might have taken a wound. So it's a pretty nasty stuff that's waiting for him. He didn't manage in the middle where he had his Death Shroud charge in. He didn't really manage to pick them up. I think he killed 8 or 9 of them, and it's just because there were so many of them and weight of attacks, he just wasn't able to get through all of them. So that was fine. It meant I still held the objective in the middle, and his squad was tied up. So we went into my third turn. Again, I scored 10 on the primary because I had my home and I had the middle. And this time round, I get Tempting Target and Extend Battle Lines, or it should be pointed out in this turn, John's other squad of Poxwalkers started to burn the other objective in if you remember the deployment zones in the bottom right hand corner. He started to burn that. So I drew a Tempting Target and Extend Battle Lines. John picked that burning objective as the Tempting Target. So for me to score a Tempting Target and to also stop his burn, I had to try and get units on, at least units on there, to out OC him or kill his Poxwalkers. Still in Deep Strike, I had my Hexmark Destroyer and my Ophidian Destroyers because they'd obviously uppy downied. So at the end of my movement phase, I did bring both of those units on within 9 of those Poxwalkers, with the idea of being that I would charge onto the objective to outscore them. Again, that would have meant 2 9-inch charges, but I had a stratagem that would have reduced it by 2 inches, so it would have been a 7-inch charge. And then I also had, I still had some re-rolls, so I could have potentially re-rolled it. I wasn't going to shoot them because I didn't want to make the charge longer. So that was the plan, to get a Tempting Target. And then the other one was Extend Battle Lines. And again, I'd get that because I just have to control objectives. If I got a Tempting Target, I would get Extend, but I was already getting Extend because I held the middle objective. The other thing that happened was the Shard went charging into Typhus's unit to effectively try and wrap them up. and the Necron warriors that were in combat with the other Lord of Contagion, they fell out of combat to effectively allow the rest of my army to shoot those Death Shroud, and then also allow the Scorpex to charge in and hopefully kill them. So that was the plan. The Shard did what the Shard did and just effectively stayed in combat with Typhus and the Death Shroud. I think he killed 2 of them and then took a couple of wounds in return, so nothing too savage there. By this point, the Technomancer, who had had all of the Wraiths killed, was now next to the Shard. So at the end of every movement phase, I could put D3 wounds back on the Shard. So that was just a nice, annoying thing that the Technomancer can do for the Shard. So that was good. Then in the middle, the Scorpex pretty much killed the Death Shroud that they went charging into, and the Lord, the Lord of Contagion, did do his die and then stand back up. But that happened at the end of the phase, and what had actually happened, which so basically the shooting that I'd done had killed the Death Shroud and had taken out most of these punchy Marines, which were all in the middle, and put a load of wounds onto his Demon Prince. So it wasn't looking particularly healthy in the middle for him. When the Scorpex go charging in, the Scorpex Lord does mortal wounds. So he did his mortal wound like tank shock, killed the Lord of Contagion, who then stood back up. But because I'd killed him in the charge phase, in the fight phase, I was then able to pile in with the Scorpex and kill him again. So effectively, it worked out very well in that regard, and just took out that squad of Death Shroud. So it did mean that I got attempted target and I got extend battle lines. And I think at this point, I kind of pulled ahead. So I'm now 1 or 2 points ahead of John. We then go into turn 4. And at this point, John doesn't have any objectives other than his home objective. So, what I got to do. The Ophidian Destroyers and the Hexmark make their charge. So they both rolled, I think I rolled a 10 and an 11. 2 charges. So they both went in, no re-rolls required. John's as sick as a dog as he's been failing 6-inch charges all over the place. And I roll up to 2 9s that you wouldn't normally see happen. So they go in, they take that, happy days. And then into John's turn 4, he doesn't have any objectives apart from his home objective, so he only scores 5 points. He draws Marked for Death and Sabotage. So Marked for Death this time around is he picks a unit that he thinks he can kill, and if he kills that unit, he gets 2 points. I pick 3 units, and if he kills any of those, he gets 5 points. So I picked 3 units he was never going to get to. He picked the flayed ones, which he did manage to kill. Sabotage is you just need a unit in a piece of terrain that's outside of your deployment zone. So if you're in a piece of terrain, you say you're sabotaging, and then it's an action, so you can't do anything else. So he picked that up with, I think, with some Poxwalkers, which is fine. So then he scored that, no worries. And at this point, he was sort of running out of assets. So his Lord of Poxes and Punchy Marines were dead. One of his Death Shroud units is dead. His Hauler and Rhino were dead, although he did have another Hauler on the other side, down by the objective that I just stopped from being burnt. And then what else did he have? He still had Typhus, but he was pretty much about to be killed. So not looking good from a unit point of view. And in my turn 4, I still scored my 10 primary. And then I drew Sabotage as well. So I had 2 units sabotaging. And then Overwhelming Force, which is you have to kill things on objectives. So he still had a couple of units that were on objectives, like the Demon Prince and Typhus, and I killed both of those effectively. So that gave me Overwhelming Force. Then we went into the final turn. John, at this point, he did have 2 back to having 2 objectives, because down on the objective where I had my Ophidian and the hex mark, although I stopped the burn, he then moved his Blight Hauler and another unit, which I can't remember what it was, onto it. So out OC'd them and effectively took that. And then he also did burn that unit. It was a spawn, actually. It was a spawn on it. He then burnt that as well, which then gave him those 15 primary points in his turn. He drew Display of Might for his secondaries, which he spent a CP on to get rid of. Display of Might is you have to have more units in no man's land than your opponent, and he didn't have anywhere near enough at that point to be able to score it. He then also drew Cleanse and Behind Enemy Lines. He was able to score Cleanse because his spawn was doing it on that back objective that he tried to burn previously. And Behind Enemy Lines, how did he get Behind Enemy Lines? That was it. He had his Lord of Poxes was still alive, so the unit was wiped out, but the Lord of Poxes was still alive, and he was just able to get into my deployment zone in that table quarter. So he finished on 80 points. And then I knew at this point what I needed to do to score it. And effectively, that was pretty much my primary was going to pick that up anyway. So I scored my 10. I also burnt an objective to get the extra bonus points. I then drew Marked for Death and Cull the Horde. I couldn't do Cull the Horde. And I did manage to kill the Marked for Death unit, so that was fine. I then drew Storm Hostile Objective, which is where you have to take an enemy unit off a objective. The only objective he had that would have qualified for that was the one that had the Blight Hauler and the spawn on it, and there was no way I was going to get anyone near him. So I then spent a CP to redraw that, and then I drew Bring It Down. And again, he had nothing I was able to get to bring it down. And I was really just at that point trying to farm it to improve my score further from the 86, because we kind of both already knew that I'd had the points to actually get it done. And so that's how it finished. That was the end of it at that point. I think going into turn 5, well, by the end of turn 4, we kind of knew how it was going to finish. It was whether or not John could maybe get a couple of good secondaries to try and push a little bit more. But that's how the game went, and that's how the scoring unfolded. So
with the scoring,
yeah,
obviously because you get like your random secondaries and stuff. Previous editions, you could tell by about turn 3,
yeah,
who was winning the game. Is it a bit more varied now, a bit more interesting? Does it keep it
I think
fresh a bit longer?
If you're playing tactical where you are drawing them, I think so. I think you can still have a pretty good idea by turn 3 which way it's going, if it is particularly one-sided. If it's fairly close, then it keeps it quite even all the way. Like in this game, it didn't feel like an 86-80, and I think John will agree with that. Like it probably felt like he was losing by a lot more than he actually was, and it actually ended up being a lot closer by the time we scored it up at the very end. So it is interesting in that regard. There is always something to play for in terms of those secondaries, and you don't need a lot of troops to actually be able to to actually score the secondaries. And as the game goes on, there's just one like my turn 5. Actually, him not having many assets left helped, because it meant I wasn't able to score any more points because they were just too far away. So it does keep it interesting. I think the bit that still doesn't change is if you've got someone that's overrunning you on primary, that still will tell you quite quickly if you're scoring. But because of this type of mission where you could only get a maximum of 10 per turn, it keeps things quite close anyway. Whereas in all of the other missions, you can max out primary at 15 points. And if you're getting 15 points, the chances are your opponent is only getting 5 or 10. And those 5 to 10 point swings over 2 turns tend to add up quite quickly. So this particular mission helped keep it close. But it does, because you never know what you're going to get from a secondary point of view. And like from John's point of view, he almost had the perfect first turn with those secondaries because they're high point secondaries and they're easy to score in the first turn. For me, like it was probably my, turns 2, 3, and 4. I got relatively lucky with my secondaries because I pulled at least one in each turn that I could score 5 points on, and then particularly turn 3 where I managed to get that tempting target as well as extend battle lines. It just gave me a really good boost to the secondaries. But you can kind of see from a secondary point of view, there was only 1 point in it. So I scored 31 and John scored 30. So we were relatively close in terms of our secondary missions. It really came down to just that one turn where I knocked him down to only one objective and held them all in no man's land that really gave me the score, because that's where those extra 5 points really came in.
Yeah, it's like little margins could have made it a much different game. Like if he had successfully burnt that objective,
Yeah,
that would have completely changed the landscape of that part of the battlefield.
yeah,
You getting secondaries from doing stuff around there, and obviously then he would have had his extra point for or his extra 5 for burning the objective. So yeah, it could have been a massive swing if that hadn't worked out for you.
Yeah, well, exactly that, because it would have been, well, he would have got 5. I wouldn't have got a tempting target. So that in itself, then, as I said, it swings it entirely back round to him being ahead. So then that would have then meant that my secondaries in the last turn, that draw could have then finished me off because I wasn't able to score.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was quite a close game. It was quite a good game. I think I'll stop sharing this for now. I think the Necron, I was going to say that the new Necron detachments and things like that are pretty good, and I think the shards, as I said, they're probably a little bit broken. So I think they'll probably get a bit of a balance change when the next thing comes around. As I said, myself and John have got a couple more dates in. I don't know whether I'm going to run Necrons for the next one, because I know they're overpowered when I start feeling bad running them. So we'll have to see.
Well, it's always nice to have a little bit of variety.
Indeed, and as I said, it's been some time since I've run the Thousand Suns, so maybe I can pull those out and we'll see what happens.
Not the year of the wolf, and no.
No, that's still some time on. I think it will be the year, but that year will happen later on. That'll be later on in the year, I reckon.
The GT army then.
Could be, yeah. Because at that point we might. I think at that point we might be in the new edition, and therefore it might be an entirely different meta, different point. Things might be very different in that regard.
Do you think it will be a massive overhaul or more of a additional tweak?
I think it will be more of a tweak this time around, because I think 10th was a big overhaul in itself. So I don't think they'll do an overhaul consecutively. I think they'll do a bit of a tweak before, and maybe 12th will be the one where they do more of an overhaul. So I think it will be certain tweaks, certain things that will probably look to change. It will be interesting to see whether they go back to indexes, which they did for the 10th edition. They didn't, I think it was for 9th. I don't think there were indexes, but I can't remember, to be honest with that. But for 10th, they went to the indexes before the codexes came out. And that was quite nice because you could see everything and do everything. But I think because they've done so much work with all of the detachments, I think rather than doing the index, I think they will probably do something along the lines of new detachments and maybe make some of the old detachments redundant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to
So
be fair, they tend to only do the indexes whenever they do the major overhauls. Because I think they've
exactly,
only done the indexes twice now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
we'll see. I think that's what they'll do. I think they'll just refine some of the detachments a little bit. I know I was watching a video the other day where someone was making the case for bringing back in force organization. So right now, obviously, the only limits
mm,
you've got is you only you can take a maximum of 3 of each type of unit unless they're battle line or troops, in which case you can take 6 of that unit, and that's your only restriction. But that's why you lose things like why the warlord at the moment isn't really relevant, because he doesn't do anything. Like whether you pick whoever you pick your warlord doesn't do anything. Whereas in the old, go back to, was it ninth, where you had your force organization, you actually got your CP then, so you didn't generate CP every turn. You had, like, if you pick this type of organization, it's you start with, I don't know, whatever it was, like 10 CP. You get a bonus one if this person's your warlord, and then you can spend 2 CP to then 2 of those CP to go into like the heavy detachment or whatever else it was. And rather than taking 2 fast attack, you were able to take 3 heavy. um, I don't think they're going to go back to it, but it's an interesting idea.
I vaguely miss those days.
I quite liked it from a army construction point of view, and I actually, because I was, after watching the video, I was thinking about it. I preferred it from an army construction point of view because I think the armies were more narrative, and I think it also made you think more about the army you wanted to build and how it worked together, rather than right now, whereas it's like if you're playing right at the top of the tournaments or whatever, the meta is I just need 3 of the best unit.
Yeah.
What's my best unit? Right, do that, max that out. What's the next best unit? Right, max that out. And that's why you get lists where you've just got, like, like the Death Guard one, for example, where your people are running 3 Lords of Contagion with 18 Death Shroud, and you're like, yeah, fair. Like that's a very good list. Not like that. It's a lot of points, but you probably don't need much more than that because they're going to kill everything they run into. They're tough,
Yeah.
and, like, that's it. You max them out. That's a pretty good list. Them, and then a big blob of 20 poxwalkers with typhus leading it. That's a list that you wouldn't want to face.
No, but the the fluff person in me is
Yeah,
like, oh, that's no, no, that would never happen. Just yeah. Give me
yeah,
give me a captain, a chaplain, 6
yeah,
tactical squads, a couple of assault squads, and you know, the old school, like your fast attacks, your heavy
yeah.
supports, and your 6 troop choices. That was how you built an army. But
Exactly.
then I I also remember the second edition when it was up to percentages.
Yeah,
So
that was, I remember that. But that what because you could then run all sorts of stuff.
oh, it was
Um,
it was mad back then. But yeah,
like one of the meme lists, because I was talking to John about this. Like, at the moment in the Space Wolves, you can take a Bloodclaw pack of up to 20. So
Mhm.
Bloodclaws can be in squads of 20, and because they're battle line, you can run 6 of them. So you could take 120 Bloodclaws in a Space Wolves list, and, like, effectively you're running them as orcs. You've
I was
just
going to
got,
say that's a green tide of
yeah,
Space Wolves. Many points
exactly.
of that.
Well, that's the thing. It's not as expensive as you'd think it'd be.
I
You,
no, I genuinely didn't think it would actually be overly expensive.
no, you've still then got enough that you could run, like, a leader character for most of those squads.
Yeah.
And I think, I guess, some army, very top players would be able to deal with that army. But if you're taking that to, like, a casual club or something like that, people would just be like, how do I get rid of all of these
It's just
these
that is
blood
a
claws?
lot of power armored wounds to shift.
Exactly, and they're just going to gum up. you get them on an objective, and that's it. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But that would be far too many blood claws to paint, and I'm not going to be doing that anytime soon. But yes, we will see. Anyway, so that was the game. They were the lists. That's how we scored it. Hopefully, that was a window into 10th for you.
Yeah, I know. I'm just gonna have to come and actually see it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think we've got some dates in, so we'll let you know when the next couple are. I think they're probably a few weeks away now, but we've got a couple in, so we'll see what we're playing at that point.
If work could just sort of calm down a little bit, then that would be fantastic.
Indeed, absolutely. All right. I think we're long one tonight. I thought it'd be a short one, but actually it took me longer than I thought to walk through that entire battle. But that's okay.
You were
Um,
reveling in your victory. That's what it
indeed,
was.
indeed. And
You wanted
John's
to get that detail across.
John's not here to defend himself, so it's even better in that regard. I'm sure he'll watch it back and love what I've said. Uh, cool. Well, we will end the stream there. Thank you for those of you that joined us. And by all means, if you watch this back at another point, feel free to add comments in on what you might want to see us talk about in the future. But we'll leave it there. Good night.
Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, we are ended. We're done.
Cool.
Cool.